Hey everyone, thanks for checking out this part of my Shin Megami Tensei retrospective. Today I'm going through the Persona stuff. It is the most popular series in the franchise, as you can tell by everything released. If you haven't seen any of my other retrospective videos, I'm a pretty hardcore collector, and Shin Megami Tensei is one of my favorite franchises, so I try to get everything that came out related to that. I have my limits, obviously. But this is a good chance for me to go through my collection, see what I've got. I'm in the middle of curating it, so it's nice to have everything out at once and take a look at it. And I figure while I do that, why not make a retrospective to go along with it? So Persona 5 was just released. According to all the advanced reviews, it looks like it's a big hit. It probably deserves it after all those years in development and all the delays. But a lot of people maybe didn't play all the previous Persona games. There aren't many, but there's quite a bit, so let's get started. To start off, Persona is a spin-off of Shin Megami Tensei. The game was modeled after Shin Megami Tensei If, which set the original Shin Megami Tensei series in a high school and focused on a group of high school kids. The creators thought that would be the best setting to use to expand the fan base, and so they set out to create Persona as a game that would help introduce more casual players to the series. The big difference between Persona and Shin Megami Tensei is that Persona focuses around a group of high school kids, and those kids fight themselves. So instead of using demons and summoning demons to fight for them, you control a whole group of human characters. These characters can fight on their own, but they also have the ability to summon their personas to fight for them. So personas are a physical manifestation of the character's psyche. They're based on aspects of the character's personality, and they can be called forth to fight in battles. It can get a little confusing because the personas are based on demons from the Shin Megami Tensei series, but yeah, just know that they are physical manifestations of the character's personality. The core theme of the entire Persona series is the exploration of the human psyche and characters discovering their true selves. The series kicks off with Megami Inbunruku. They changed the name from Megami Tensei to help differentiate the series, but the subtitle was Persona, and in North America we got Persona as part of the Revelation series. Atlas put this game out. I rented it from a local Game Power because the PS1 was killing it with RPGs at the time. Wild Arms 1 was amazing. Suikoden was amazing. Here's some new RPG I've never heard of. I played it and I hated it. Right off the bat, the first-person dungeons I couldn't get behind, the confusing combat system with limited range on all the weapons. I felt like I was always missing turns or couldn't hit anyone during my turns. And, just the movement too, because the game is an isometric game, but using the D-pad, it was really tough to move in the direction you wanted to. So I had master tank controls, but I could not master that. I returned the game and immediately forgot all about it. Persona 1 stars a group of high school kids who end up playing a game called Persona and unlock the ability to summon their personas. At the same time, demons begin invading their hometown, so they try to figure out what's going on with that and explore those mysteries. Persona 1 was released in Japan in 1996, and just 3 months later it was released in North America. There were quite a few changes to the game. There was an entire portion of the game removed. The characters were completely changed to appeal to a Western audience. The dialogue was changed to match that, and just the translation itself was poor in general. The game had players move around town on a world map. The game used an isometric view in a lot of the rooms that you go through the game, but those rooms are connected by a first-person view maze-like area like the original Shin Megami Tensei games. Combat was changed up quite a bit. You could position your party members from the status screen, and then when you went into battle, you could choose to use your melee attack, your gun, or summon your persona for an attack. But the battlefield was a grid, and you couldn't move your characters. You could only hit certain spaces on the opposing side, so the combat was really heavily focused on where you positioned your characters and what kind of spaces their attacks could hit. One of the really interesting things about the game was the idea of optional characters. So you had a party, you could add new characters to it, but you only had so much space. There's a number of optional characters you could get through the game, I think 4, but you could only take 2. So if you wanted to see how those other characters were, you'd have to play through the game at least twice. And it wasn't always obvious how to get those characters, so you might need a walkthrough for that. With the success of Persona 3 over here, Atlas decided to go back and revisit some of those older games, so they updated and released an English version of the Persona PSP game. This game features quite a few changes. All the characters are reverted back to their original, character designs and dialogue instead of some of the localization choices they made with the PlayStation version. The Snow Queen scenario was added back in, so it's not so much a side quest as an alternate route through the game. It's a massive alternate route that was cut out of the original game, so that's all back in. And there's cutscenes added. A lot of the music has been changed to match the Persona 3 J-poppy kind of music. You know, there's a lot. They did a lot to change this game, but still not enough that I could get through it. I've tried multiple times. It's just still a little too rough for me. So for hardcore fans only, I'd say. It is a nice package, though. It really just includes the slipcase, the PSP game itself, and the original soundtrack. Well, not the original soundtrack, but the soundtrack for the updated version. There are a lot of browser and mobile-based spin-offs in Japan. None of those came out over here, but there is one for Persona 1 entitled Megami Ibunruku Persona, Chapter of the Foreign Tower of Emptiness, and it's a 3D dungeon crawler that uses the environments from the first game. So while the original PlayStation release of Persona didn't seem to hook me, apparently it did gain a cult following. It did pretty well over here, and so it led the way for more Persona games to be released in the West. The next Persona game that was developed was Persona 2 Innocent Sin, which was released in Japan in 1999. Nearly everything about the game was improved. The first-person dungeons are gone, the combat was more streamlined and simplified, the story was more interesting. All in all, a much better game. But Atlus decided not to release it over here for a couple reasons. First, they felt that the game relied too heavily on some Japanese cultural information that Western gamers wouldn't understand, and that might be too tricky to localize. And they also were worried because there's lots of references to the Nazis and Hitler in the game, and they just felt that wouldn't go over with a Western audience, so they decided not to release that here. The game stars students from 2 different high schools who get the ability to summon personas. While investigating a bunch of local rumors, they end up facing off against a cult led by the mysterious Joker. Years later, despite some technical issues, a fan group was able to create an English translation patch for the original PlayStation game. That was actually one of the reasons I ended up seeking out a modded PS1, which we used recently to play Resident Evil 1.5, and I'm glad I did so, because it was a great game to play that game in English a couple years before the PSP update came out. Speaking of which, PSP got an updated version of Persona 2 Innocent Sin. It's the first time the game was officially released in English, and like the first game, it includes the slipcase, the game itself, and the updated soundtrack. After Innocent Sin was complete, the creator thought the plot could benefit from a second viewpoint, so they set to work on Persona 2 Eternal Punishment. Eternal Punishment is the only game in the series where the player controls some adult characters. They control the reporter Maya, who's investigating the Joker curse. Along the way, she meets up with some of the characters from Innocent Sin, and together they chase down Joker. The game seemed to have done really well over here. I never saw it when it came out. I only know one other person who played it on release, but thank you to that person, my buddy John, who recommended I check it out before Persona 3 came out. Back then, I was able to pick it up on eBay for less than $20, so I'm glad for that because it is crazy expensive now. There was a PSP update for it, like the other 2 games, but it was never released in English, and that's a bit of a shame because they actually added new content to it. So the original writer came back and added a new scenario, which we never got to experience over here. One thing I do have for Persona 2 Eternal Punishment is this strategy guide, which I managed to come across a little while ago. I'm still kicking myself because I came across a strategy guide for Revelations Persona at MGC a couple years ago and didn't pick it up. It was about $60 US, and I kind of regret it because I've never seen it since. I don't see it on eBay. I'm gonna have to hope I come across it one day again because I really would like that for my collection. There are a couple strategy guides that have come out for Shin Megami Tensei games, but not that many. And I'm going for a kind of complete game collection, so I'd like that stuff to go with it. Persona 2 had a couple spin-off things. The first is Persona Tsumi to Batsu, or Persona Crime and Punishment, which is a 3-volume manga spin-off of the Persona 2 games that was never translated into English. The story takes place in the same school as Persona 2, but it stars a completely different group of students. These students manage to get personas as well, and they get wrapped up in the fallout of an event that happened to one of their friends 10 years prior. 2 cell phone games were also released. The first was Persona 2 Innocent Sin Lost Memories. This is a cell phone game that plays like Innocent Sin but features an original story. And Persona 2 Eternal Punishment Infinity Mask. This is a game that has an original story that takes place after the events of Eternal Punishment and plays just like that. Alright, now we're getting to the big stuff. Shin Megami Tensei, they added the name back in. Persona 3. So, the creator of Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne and the Digital Devil Saga series decided to go ahead with a new Persona game. They meant to expand upon the ideas of introducing the Shin Megami Tensei series to a new, more casual fan base, and they streamlined it even further. And this is what they released. This was the original release, which came with the slipcase, this mini art book, a CD soundtrack, and of course the game itself. Persona 3 stars a group of high school kids like the other games, but it is vastly different. Everything has been redesigned. The story of Persona 3 revolves around a character who moves to this town and starts going to this new high school and discovers he has the ability to summon his persona. He joins a group called the SES, who fight the shadows during the dark hour. So at midnight, there's an extra hour to the day that only certain people can witness, and during that time, their school changes into this huge dungeon and shadows attack the town. So it's up to this group of people to stop that dark hour from happening, basically, and beat back the shadows. The game was a huge hit. The RPG mechanics mixed with the kind of social school sim really took off. The game introduced social links, which enhanced your persona abilities a little bit based on you making friends with different people throughout town. But that wasn't just a little stat system. There was impressive side stories and some really touching characters you would meet through those events. The whole game had a heavy focus on plot and characters, more so than maybe any RPG to that point. The game featured randomly created dungeon floors. You had to go up 255 floors or something to beat the game, but you blew through them pretty quickly. Combat is completely changed from previous games. You can still use melee attacks or choose persona abilities, but placement isn't as important. You only control your main character. The other characters, you can try to give them strategies, but they pretty much do whatever they want. And one interesting note is the main character gets to choose from many personas. They unlock hundreds of personas throughout the game, so that feels a bit more like the traditional Shin Megami Tensei, where they can summon all these different demons and switch between these demons during combat to give them different strengths and weaknesses, and they can exploit those weaknesses to take down harder enemies. The popularity of the game led to tons of additional media, spin-offs, expansions, and the characters are still used in games to this day, so there's a ton of stuff here. I think Persona 5 might actually end that, but there is a ton of ancillary media to go through. So let's get to some of the other stuff. First up is Persona 3 Fez, which was a updated version of the game. You could play through the original game, or you could play through the new answer scenario, which takes place after the game and lets you control Aegis as the main character. It introduces a new character there. It introduces a new series of randomly generated dungeons, and it is hard. The game was designed basically to be played as hard mode. That's the only way you can play it. And let's just say you're going to be grinding a little more than usual. That mode is fairly long on its own, so it's a great addition to the game as well. After Fez, we got Persona 3 Portable. It is a really cool version of the game. It's been streamlined a lot so that it's more easier to play on a portable system, and that that PSP didn't have the power the PS2 did, so some sacrifices had to be made, but there are a lot of great enhancements to it too. You can choose a female character to play as, so now you can play through the whole game as a female character, and there are different social links and dating options for that character. And the social links are vastly improved. Some of them are very different from the original game. The new ones are very interesting. It's worth playing through even if you played through the game twice already. So that gets us into the surrounding media. There was a manga that covers the game. It only started coming out here recently, which is a surprise. So there are, I think, 10 or 11 volumes of this one. Volume 3 was released recently, so this is a cool manga version of the game for people who don't want to play through it. There's also a series of anime movies, 4 of them total. I believe all 4 have been released in Japan. I've only seen the first 3 so far. They are a great retelling of the story. The anime is great looking. It's a really cool thing. I don't have it because you can only get the import versions from Right Stuff, and they are crazy expensive, on like $70 or $80 per movie, which is just, I can't do it. I'm sure they'll have a sale at some point. Maybe there'll be a nice bundle when all 4 are released. But yeah, I'll keep my eye open for that. Finally, and this is a really strange one, Persona 3 Trinity Soul. It is a 26, I believe, episode anime series. It takes place after Persona 3. It doesn't feel like Persona at all. It actually feels a lot more like Persona 1. It's a really dark story. It still features, a character who can summon personas and fight shadows, but, it takes place 10 years after the game. It doesn't feel like it has any connection to the game other than the backstory. And it's no longer considered canon because of all the stuff that's come after the game. But these box sets that are released by NIS are really nice. It comes, they have these nice big boxes. There are these 2 amazing books that come with it. They go through some of the, there are notes on episodes, on characters. They're great little art books that come with it. I wish the anime series was better, but I know a lot of people do. So this is more of an oddity than anything. Persona 3 actually had a ton of Japan-only mobile and browser games. I'll just read those off now because there's a ton of them. There is an RPG side story titled Persona 3M. There is an action game set 10 years before Persona 3 titled Aegis, the First Mission. And there is an alternate version of Persona 3 featuring different characters called Persona 3 Social. There's also a Persona 3 The Night Before spin-off game. And shortly after that, there was another free-to-play browser game called Persona 1 Soft. So some of those sound like really interesting side stories. I'd like to see that Aegis First Mission one. I'd like to know The Night Before, but we just never had that opportunity. So there was a Persona 3 art book put out by Udon, which is great. Finally, in 2008, we get Persona 4. So this edition came with a soundtrack, which is always great because the music in these games is great. Persona 4 features a more contained story instead of, the world being under threat of shadows. This is a small town story. So the main character moves out to a small town, learns that he has the ability to summon personas, and he finds out that people are being kind of kidnapped. They find this mysterious TV world that they go into, and that's where they summon their personas and fight shadows. One by one, you go through different dungeons. They're no longer randomly generated, and try to save the people that are trapped in that world. It's a really close-knit group. The characters are incredible, and they really resonated with a lot of gamers. I think that's why we got so much other material with those characters. The gameplay has all the right improvements over Persona 3. Now you can control the entire party, so you don't have to worry about your party members doing stupid things. The dungeons are easier to navigate, and they're designed better. It just feels like a tighter experience overall. The new social links are great, and that system continues to work really well here. It continues the same school year trend, which also just really lets you get in touch with these characters' lives. Shortly later, for Vita, we got P4 Golden. This Persona 4 Golden was an updated version of the PS2 game. They added a new character, Marie, who is incredible. In my opinion, I don't think people like her that much, but I love her. She adds a whole new scenario to the game that you play through. She's a social link, so you can go through all the events with her. It adds Adachi as a social link, which is really interesting. And it's just, it's just a great way to experience the game. It's one of the best reasons to own a Vita. This special edition came with a bunch of cool stuff. It came with this Persona 4 skin, this Persona 4 golden case for your Vita. Some cool sticker sheets, actually, of all the characters. There's a second skin. I must have had the 2 for some reason. And the game itself. So yeah, this is a great way to play the game if you own the Vita. Persona 4 had even more media than P3. First of all, there's the manga series, which is still being released over here. I think there's 10 volumes total. I think we recently just got volume 6. It's a great retelling of the basic game. It doesn't include the golden stuff. The anime was 26 episodes. For some weird reason, the audio on the Blu-ray is only English, so you're gonna have to deal with the dub. Although because you've played the games all dubbed, it wasn't that big of a deal, but surprisingly the DVD includes dual audio, so that's weird. These were imports that I had to get from Right Stuff, usually crazy expensive, but there was a huge sale at Christmas time, so I managed to pick them up. And this is the Persona 4 Golden series, so this adds all the Marie stuff from Golden to the anime, and it adds a whole bunch of the fun stuff that was missing from the anime, you know, stuff that they cut because it didn't fit and wasn't important to the story. It's all in this series. So these sets are kind of nice. Each of them come with the DVD themselves, even though it's only like 6 episodes each set. A soundtrack, postcards, and a little art book. As a pre-order bonus for Persona 4 PS2 version, or was it Golden? I can't remember. I think it was PS2. There is an art book that came out with that, which, you know, features all the characters and stuff. It's a really nice piece. And, you know, as if that wasn't enough Persona art for you, there was the official Persona 4 art book, which, you know, is like the P3 one, also put out by Udon. Finally, for Weiss Schwarz, there was a Persona 4 pack. I went pretty hardcore here and collected all of the cards. I think I'm missing 2 of the starter deck promos, which were really hard to come by, but other than that, I've got everything. There's some really nice stuff. There's a lot of, well, not a lot, but there are a couple signed cards. So they're signed by the Japanese voice actor. You know, there's just over 100 cards. There's shiny variants and all that stuff you expect with a typical card game. I think they're a combination of a couple of the sets that were released in Japan. I'm glad to own it, but it's kind of a shame because there were other Persona sets that never came out over here. So we never had the Persona Q set or the Persona 3 set. Persona 5 set just came out in Japan, so I'm hoping that that comes out over here, but we'll see. All right, let's dive deeper into these spin-offs. So first up is Persona 4 Arena. Here I've got the PlayStation 3 and Xbox version. This is a 2D anime fighter by the guys who did Blaze Blue and Guilty Gear. It is a really good anime fighter. It's actually maybe my favorite anime fighter. The characters are great. It's got a whole new story. It introduces new characters. It takes place after Persona 4, and it's a real fun fighting game. The story mode has got a bunch of visual novel segments that explain the story while you play through the different fights. And it can get a little long-winded, especially because you have to play through the fighting mode with every character to kind of see the whole story, but regardless, it's a great game. Udon also released a P4 Arena art book, which has a bunch of art from Persona 4 Arena, and we picked up this Persona 4 Arena soundtrack on vinyl. It's got 6 tracks. I think it was a pre-order bonus for Arena in Australia, but I love vinyl and I love Persona, so I had to pick it up. Following up on that, we had P4 Arena Ultimax. The original P4 Arena ended with a bit of I wouldn't call it a cliffhanger, but there is definitely some unresolved threads. So this one comes back and ties in a bunch of that stuff. Introduces some new characters. The story is much more streamlined. Instead of having to play every character, you can just play through the scenario straight up. There's also a lot of Persona 3 characters that are added. So after you're done the Persona 4 story mode, you play through a Persona 3 story mode. There's a downloaded Adachi mode. He takes a great spot in this game. It's also just a real fun fighting game. The mechanics hold up just as well as P4. Actually, if this is the only one you get, you can download the story mode from Persona 4 and play that in this game, so that's a nice little touch. I wish it was more streamlined like the story mode, but whatever. This actually came with a couple extra things which are really interesting. First, it came with this blow-up teddy. I have one sealed, I have one open that I used in another video. It's just a little blow-up teddy doll. It's kind of neat, and it came with the series, well, half of the series of tarot cards. So you could get your cards, your Arcana cards. You got half of them in this set, and the other half came in the special edition for Persona Q. So Persona Q is a real interesting beast. It stars all the characters from Persona 3 and 4. They come together through time and have to crawl through dungeons. It is by the makers of Etrian Odyssey, and it feels very much like Etrian Odyssey. So it kind of goes back to those roots of Shin Megami Tensei with first-person dungeon crawling, but the dungeon crawling is built exactly like Etrian Odyssey. The battles are built just like Etrian Odyssey. It is Persona-themed. It is amazing to see all those characters together. It's something worth checking out, but, you know, it is really hard, like Etrian Odyssey, like Shin Megami Tensei. It is a really difficult game. The special edition also came with a little Persona Q art book, showing off some of the new characters. This 3DS case and the game itself, a Persona Q soundtrack, which is real cool. One cool thing about this Nintendo 3DS carry case is that it came around the same time as the Persona Q Nintendo 3DS XL. This is my favorite looking Nintendo 3DS. Let me get it out. It is an amazing looking system. There was a free theme you could get that made the menus look great and played the Velvet Room music in the background. It was a ton of fun. My only complaint is that the new Nintendo 3DS came out right around this time too, so this really could have been a new Nintendo 3DS, but, you know, they kept it an old one. Lastly, for Persona Q, we have the manga, which is, I'm not sure if they canceled it or if it's still coming out over here. There are, in Japan, I don't know how many volumes, to be honest. I think over 5 volumes for each side. Here we got 2 volumes for each side pretty quickly, and then nothing since then. So there are different versions. There's the P4 side, which shows you the story from the characters from Persona 4, and there is the P3 side, which shows the characters from P3. Although, just like the game, the stories kind of conflict. So if you read this one and then you read this one, it doesn't match up. You're better off to pick one or the other and then read the other one, just to say like, hey, what happens if I pick that side? But they didn't do the job of like building it in such a way that it all flows as one cohesive story when you read both sides. So finally, the last release with the name Persona in it before Persona 5, Persona Dancing All Night. This is a Vita rhythm game that is very similar to the Project Diva series. It's an all-new story that takes place after Persona 4, where the cast from Persona 4 is training to be in a concert with Rise and get caught up in this, you know, typical craziness, sent to a new kind of shadow world and having to save different idols. It is a real fun game. It's got tracks from Persona 3 and 4 and remixes, and it's got a ton of fun stuff in it. Special edition came with this pouch for, I guess, the Vita, although it's really big for that. It's a really nice looking pouch, actually. There's a new skin for the Vita, just like Persona 4 Golden. There is the game itself and the Persona Dancing All Night soundtrack, which you definitely want if you're playing this game. You dig the music. There's also a series of Teddy stickers, which are great. And there's this gold Teddy keychain. So that's pretty much everything with the name Persona in it, but that doesn't mean we're done yet because there's still 2 titles we got to talk about. The first is Catherine, which is a spin-off of the Shin Megami Tensei series, but it is a puzzle game. It was their first game in HD. It definitely takes place in the world of Persona, but it's not your traditional RPG. It's this puzzle game where you pull blocks out and move along block to climb a tower before, you know, the bottom falls away on you. It's got all the typical themes of Persona, but it's got this really interesting story about this guy who isn't sure that he wants to get involved with his longtime girlfriend. He doesn't want to commit, and it leads to a really interesting supernatural story about relationships. The pre-order bonus was this cool little art book and soundtrack. The music is great. It's all based on like famous classical music, but it's all remixed and just sounds great. I have the Xbox version as well. One interesting thing to note is that there were 2 covers for the game for both the PS3 version and Xbox version. PS3 features Catherine with a K, which is the blonde one, and the Xbox version features the your girlfriend Catherine, the brunette. But they're both feature artwork that's a little, I guess you'd call it risque. So for places like Walmart and stuff in North America, they have a cover that's a little less provocative. And that's really interesting, and I was looking for those for a while, but buying 4 versions of the same game, even for a collector like me, is just maybe pushing it a bit too far. I did pick up the special edition for this game though, and it's a pretty nice package. It's got a styled like the pizza box from the pizzeria in the game itself, a Catherine pillowcase and t-shirt, and a replica pair of boxers from the main character Vincent. So a lot of cosplay bait, I guess. But it's a decent package all around, and it's a really fun game. If you don't like the RPG elements of the Persona series, this is a wacky, fun way to experience those themes and that level of storytelling in a very different experience. Finally, we get to the last game, Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE. This is basically Shin Megami Tensei meets Fire Emblem, but it's really, you might as well call it Persona with weapons that have the souls of Fire Emblem characters, because that's what it is. It uses an idol theme, so you control a group of idols. There's all kinds of mysterious stuff going on. You go into these dungeons. Everything about it screams Persona. It is just a really cool idea. It takes the RPG mechanics of Persona. It throws in a little bit of Fire Emblem stuff. It's hard to describe, but I highly recommend you check it out. It was only released for Wii U, which is a bit of a shame because so many people didn't play that system, but it is worth checking out. This is a special edition, which came with the game itself, an art book, and a soundtrack, which, you know what, it's my favorite kind of special edition, to be honest. When you get too many big, bulky things, it's hard to keep stuff around for a collector like me, so I want an art book, I want a soundtrack, I don't necessarily need a whole bunch of other stuff. Anyway, thanks for checking out the Persona episode. I think that's pretty much everything I can say about Persona. I mean, I could say a lot more, but I kind of want you to go and experience the games for yourself. So please do that. It is an amazing series. It is the best way to enter Shin Megami Tensei. So I shot that Persona overview before 5 came out, but I didn't get around to editing it. So 5 is out. It's been out for a while, and I thought I'd go through what came out for that game. So first off, 5 came out for PS3 and PS4. Here is the PS3 version. It is just your basic case with just the disc and no insert or manual or anything. PS4 had a version like that. The standard PS4 version had pretty much the same thing, but with a blue case. And PS4 also had a steelbook version, and it had the Take Your Heart Premium Edition, which wasn't in short supply at all. Actually, I think this was really easy to get. A lot of people grabbed it, which is cool because it wasn't that much more, and it does come with a ton of cool stuff. So it's a really cool box design. Inside is the school bag that you've probably seen a lot of people carry around if you go to cons and stuff. A lot of people are carrying this. I use this for my cosplay, so that was really cool. A little Morgana plush, which is really cute. The Persona 5 soundtrack that comes with 19 tracks, and the Persona 5 art book, which is, well, it's a small art book. Well, it's not small at all, actually. It is, what's this, like 65 pages, roughly? 65 pages of Persona art, although there is a much bigger art book coming out soon, so you can pre-order that on Amazon. And the game itself, which is the steelbook version I mentioned earlier. So again, this is a really nice steelbook. This one has, you know, the warranty card or something in there, or a little warning card or something in there. And the game is in the system right now. So yeah, so that is it for Persona 5. Like I mentioned, there is a huge art book coming out soon. If you've seen my statues episode for Persona 3 and 4, there is a set of Persona 5 statues coming out soon. They've announced Joker and Panther, and there's a Futuba, just regular clothes statue coming out. Also, I mentioned this in the small publishers episode I did, but I Am 8-Bit is putting out a vinyl. They're putting out 2, actually. There's a 4-disc soundtrack and a 6-disc kind of special edition, which was pretty expensive, limited to, I think, 3,000 copies, and that sold out. So I got the 4-disc one coming. I'm looking forward to that. And yeah. So this is Persona 5 stuff so far. I'm sure we're going to see a ton more. Thanks for checking this out, and stay tuned for the next parts of the Shin Megami Tensei overview.